Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of the Buddy Study Group for Worksite Solutions. Not only is it another session, it's the last of the year and the last Buddy Study Group of the year. So if you've been with us throughout this year and even further beyond that, we appreciate you being here and we'll help you close out the year right. So today I wanted to take some time. It's a topic we've covered early on in the year, but as I like to do with some of these training topics, whenever we start to get our sea legs more and more with a certain section of the business, I always want to put it back in front of you guys and report back on kind of what we've learned in the field, both from you and other folks that we're working with. And today is small groups. So, small groups, ever since we really announced the availability to get guaranteed issue down to 3 or 5 employees. There's been a lot of interest in small groups, so that's given us really a lot of experience to be able to learn really quickly and impart that knowledge upon you guys. So, small groups, I would characterize them as I guess a two-headed beast. I think if you do them right, they are fantastic. They're an excellent source of revenue. They're an excellent source of referrals. Overall, a really great thing for your business. Um, I do think, however, that there is, I don't want to say a wrong way, but there's an inefficient way to work with small groups. I think efficiency is the key. And if you do not have that efficiency, they can take up a lot of their time for what they can do to help your business. So I want to just kind of dive into that concept. We'll talk about, the products for small group. We'll talk about the process for small groups and feel free to ask me any questions throughout. I think, I work on the implementation side with groups of all shapes and sizes, but I've been working with a lot more small groups this year. So happy to answer any questions that you have on. So, what do we consider a small group? I always feel like when we talk about small group, large group, mid-sized group, we got to kind of define them. And I define small groups as really, for me, under 100 employees, but you could argue for under 50. But most of the time when I am working with a small group, we're generally dealing with under 25. But as we know, the smallest group we can work with is 3. And there are some special things we need to do to be able to get those groups to move forward. Um, but yeah, small group, you can really generalize it as under 100, but I guess there are different classes of small groups you can work with. Mark, I saw you came off mute. Was there anything you wanted to
No, the only thing I
chime
would
in on?
add is that there's still group plans.
Yes.
And as such, if you're just doing it for one individual, you're probably going down the wrong path
Yes.
to kind of find a workaround for some issue you're having with individual products. But think about the benefits of the group plan and the ability to offer and educate a larger segment of people as the goal, the primary goal. Yes, the business owner can buy the maximum GI coverage or SI coverage, and that is oftentimes what we see. But you want to have the mentality that they're trying to get the coverage for the folks that they care about around them too. Um,
100%.
so, if you have that in mind, you're going to have success because everything else follows from there. And that's what the group carriers want to attract. And that's the type of risk that they want. It will generate all around sustainable program.
Should I break out Microsoft Paint? Because the first thing I think about with small groups and the way I characterize them as kind of they can be really, really good, or they can kind of be a rock in your shoe for your business. I almost want to just create a T chart. So why don't we? This is going to be awful, but I think it's going to be funny too, for my lack of artistic skill and ability to actually write with a mouse. Okay, so let's just break this down with positives and negatives. I think um, it's not this black and white, but I think this is an easy way to be able to outline it for you all. So I think one of the positives is access for small groups. Okay, this is more like a classroom now. I kind of like this. Access. So with small groups, we're obviously dealing with smaller numbers of employees. And when we compare this to large groups, I think one of the big challenges we run into is, man, how am I going to make sure out of an employer that is 23,000 people, how am I going to make sure that enough people actually see this offer, become aware of this offer, and become educated enough on this offer to be able to make a decision? And that is the real challenge. With small groups, you have the ability, even sometimes, to say, hold an educational webinar and have the entire group in one room, right? So I think when it comes to education, I think at times when it comes to communication, if we're dealing with a group of, say, 7 employees who work out of a very small office, all it takes is walking down the hall to be able to spread a message, right? And I think that's a big thing because at the end of the day, participation is really incumbent upon the access, the education, and the awareness, right? So I think the ability to kind of access the whole group without a gigantic logistical undertaking is definitely one of the big advantages of small groups. I think kind of going hand in hand with that is uh, intimacy. So we're able to access all the employees at once. But I actually think the relationship building piece of working with small groups is excellent. It's a lot of fun. I think it's much easier to form relationships with small groups and mom and pop type groups because I think the interrelationships in the workplace are actually better. And I've noticed just getting on calls with small groups, doing education with small groups, there's kind of a lighthearted family atmosphere in a lot of these get-togethers. And I think anything like that that helps you build rapport, you walk into the webinar, you can get a sense of the culture of the room immediately, which I really love. When we're on larger webinars or we're talking about larger groups, there are so many employees who don't even know each other, right? So I think that kind of goes hand in hand with access is that intimacy, right? So I really like those things that can, the intimacy can seem intangible, but this is a relationship-based business, so I think it actually goes a longer way than you may think, and I've just kind of noticed that empirically.
Hey, Jason, just to add to that, I
Hmm.
wholeheartedly agree with what you're saying here, but it's nice in a way to not be on a one-to-one because it takes a lot of pressure off the people in the room that just kind of want to soak it in. But you'll
Right.
probably have the lead person, maybe it's the business owner, that is kind of advocating for it and encouraging people to participate. And as a result of that intimacy and access, you tend to have higher average premiums
Agreed.
right out of the gate. There's just this almost implicit endorsement and it takes the pressure off of people. So some of the groups, I'll give the example we had like a 7 Life group, which again, to do those successfully, we need oftentimes some level of employer funding. But they ended up funding up the max, guaranteed issue for that particular product. And given the ages of the employees, I think the total premium was close to 40,000 a year for just those 7.
Right. Yeah.
So, don't just assume, right, it's a small group, they're going to buy the minimum, right? Because again, they're not just getting it for one person. When they take, the product seriously and they see the value of it and there's that endorsement, people take full advantage of it.
Yeah, and when we do those webinars, you've been on several of them with me where the whole group is in one room. When the Zoom meeting shuts off, it's not as if nobody says anything to each other and we all get up and robotically turn and go back to our desks. There's innately some conversation of like, what do you think? What did you think of the presentation? Or, just talking about, where you're at as far as what you're going to enroll in with others And that really, really goes a long way. Questions come up, which gives you more opportunity to reach out and touch people and to continue that education at a deeper level, right? I think sometimes with smaller groups where we do use long-term care specialist consultants, we even get, a higher ratio of consultations just because that word is spreading, which is really, really helpful. So I want to counterbalance this a little bit. We'll kind of, um, go category to category here. I think one of the potential drawbacks, and this may seem counterintuitive, but I'm just going to put the word busy. For small groups, I think many people are taking on many tasks. And you may not have, say, that one person or that one group of employees who are dedicated to, say, human resources. But though we have that access and that intimacy and we can more easily identify our advocate, that advocate who's doing some of the HR type functions also generally has other very important and time consuming roles within the business, right? So it may seem counterintuitive. This is like a, 10-person group. Small employers tend to be very efficient, and to be efficient, you generally have to have people working on multiple jobs. So it's something to just be aware of. Um, I don't take it as a huge drawback, but it's something as a word to the wise to just keep in mind that these folks are busy and can be stretched thin. So you have to have that patience, awareness, and understanding when working with them. Their head of operations may also just be head of HR by default, right? So it's something you definitely have to keep in mind. I would say another item on the small group side, I'm just going to call it, let's say, um, I'll say it can be a little bit of a time trap. And what I mean by that is that I'm sure you do this in your own business. You are evaluating how much time do I put into an activity or a client or a potential sale versus what am I standing to gain from it, right? These are kind of time management skills we all have to be able to exercise as agents, right? So for small groups, again, another kind of word to the wise, we have to make sure that we are efficient when dealing with small groups, because if we deal with groups kind of across the spectrum, small and large alike, many times those larger groups represent a larger revenue generating opportunity, or at the very least, represent a much higher ceiling, right? So it's important, and you'll learn this as you work with a couple of small groups, um, that once you get an efficient, streamlined process ironed out and you get more familiar with it, you will be able to kind of apply those templates to other small groups with some, light customization as is absolutely necessary. But I urge you, obviously, make them feel like individuals. Every one of our clients is special to us, but if you spend too much time trying to make things custom or holding hand too much, it may actually kind of take you backwards from an efficiency perspective.
Yeah. I think it's really important client selection. You see this in all lines of business, and it can be extreme ends of the spectrum, right? Where you have a client that's too overly needing of your time, and you have to continue to reinforce basic concepts over and over again. And then you have clients that ghost you and disappear when they show they're interested. And either one of those is kind of a time trap for you. You have to be
Agreed.
respectful of your time and obviously the quality of the opportunity. But somebody that's kind of reliable, I'll call it credible, that's really what you're looking for. That's going to follow through with, doing what they say they're going to do. and being respectful of your time as a professional, knowing that you're busy too. And that's just true, of course, across the board. But I think that's really important with these small groups is they can really suck you into them if you let the client kind of do that to you.
And it's like if all other things being equal outside of the group side, right? If you're dealing with kind of a needier client for a small group or a needier client for a large group, again, that kind of makes the decision making easier as to which you may select for a client, or if you select both, obviously, who you may spend more time on. So I think it's just always important as a general practice to just be aware of your time versus revenue, 80/20 principles, right?
Yeah.
That's not to say ignore them, but keep things simple and really lean on us as a team to help you with what you need to still make that small groups day without spending too much time.
Yeah. You should hear it in their voice, in their what their responses are to their excitement level for this.
Yep.
Every single small group we work with gets really excited about this type of plan and the opportunity. So if they're not giving you those signals, if you're trying too hard to persuade them, probably you got to continue to look for clients that are ready to do this because there's so many small businesses out there, right?
Yeah, I think that is easily one that can go into our positive column here is interest. And there's a reason for that, right? There's a reason why more small groups tend to be super duper excited compared to larger groups. That's because small groups don't always get the offers or the access to benefits that they'd like. And it can totally be understandable, right? Just because I don't have 5,000 employees means I can't have access to XYZ benefit or XYZ benefit level, right? So if you bring them an offer that you think is a really good offering, they're going to be excited because they're not going to get as many opportunities as the big guys, right? So I think that's kind of psychologically why we see a lot more average interest and excitement, and that translates in a big, big way. Um, what else? What else would you add to the positive column, Mark? I thought that was a good one.
Yeah, really thinking about, to your point, how to keep it simple. And what I mean simple, that also makes it much more streamlined for you to enroll. It can be as simple as, like Jason was saying, is, well, they're paying for the whole plan, so we can automatically enroll them through a census enrollment. And we don't necessarily have to go through an application for each individual person. The webinar, like Jason was saying, could be let's just get everyone into a room and have a conversation. It doesn't have to be a whole production where you have to send out invites and you have to see who registers and attends. Everyone's in the room, right? And that's, so you have access right there.
And
So just
because of
keep that
that,
in.
yeah,
Okay.
because of that, there's quick enrollments generally. Some small groups we can see get turned around enrollment open to enrollment close in 2 weeks, maybe even less than that. We've seen 1 day enrollments. There is a broker or two that we work with who really have the small group process down, and they work with local groups, and their strategy is to get everything in place. And once we get up to the enrollment, I am going to see them in person, get enroller access in the platform that we use for small groups, and I will literally enroll every single employee one to one. So they'll have a portion that's employer funded, and I'm going to do a one-to-one consultation with every single employee in the course of 1 day and handle their voluntary buy-up and close the platform right then and there. 1 day enrollment can't get much easier than that. And the broker is essentially representing the enroller, the education, and the implementation. So that's really what I mean about small groups being high potential. If you really get your process down, which you can really start to learn quickly after you get a group or two under your belt, these can be super quick. With larger groups, of course, we're dealing with 30-day enrollment periods, or perhaps three 30-day enrollment periods over the course of 2 years, or maybe we're getting a full year of a special enrollment period, and those things can drag out. And there's a lot of work in making sure that the iron stays hot there. This is getting the iron so hot it just kind of like falls through the ironing board and you're done. It's very nice when you're able to actually get the process completely streamlined. So
Yeah,
uh,
I think if you're working on individual cases and you can write 5 to 10 apps in a day, that's a pretty good day at the office, right?
that's right. That's right. Exactly. And part of it is not even paid for by the client you're sitting down with, right? So it's it's powerful. Um,
Oh, and by the way, no declines.
that's right. Exactly. You have your certificate. You're essentially delivering the policy at the same time as you enroll. So pretty fantastic there. I would say on the drawback side, I would say voluntary. And I'll explain this in a bit more detail, but I don't think I can handle drawing with a mouse a word any longer than that to describe what I'm about to talk about.
Jason, I'm shocked you got this far with paint, to be honest with you. So
I
I'm
I
impressed.
I'm glad I ran with the idea. We're a little bit more interactive here, and my handwriting's not as embarrassing as I thought it'd be. So, just kind of talking about this piece here for small groups, voluntary is I don't like speaking in absolutes, but it's just not going to work in almost all cases. And I say almost all because there's a unicorn in any category and anything that you can name out there in the world. But voluntary is just not going to get it done. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Number one, when we're working with large groups, the carrier will tell us, hey, we need 5, 10, 15% participation from this group. Uh, Now, if we were told from a carrier we need 10% participation on a group of six, that would mean we need one app, right? But we know with the standard, we need six apps. We need 100% participation to hit the participation minimum. If that group was with Transamerica, we need 5 out of 6 to voluntarily reach into their checkbook and purchase a plan, an ongoing premium. It is a tough ask. It's a tough ask for a group of 300 we've seen. It's a tough ask for a group of 700 we've seen before. I mean, voluntary can be a tough ask depending on the group, but also just in general. Um, so when we're asking for 90, 100% participation with some of these groups, um, you're just not going to get it done with voluntary most of the time. So if there are budget constraints, that can be a roadblock because employer funding is the name of the game for small groups. We need to be able to fund a plan to the point where we're hitting that minimum. That is the only strategy that I've seen work in an efficient, harmonious way that is good for everybody involved.
Yeah. That kind of leads also to a tip for prospecting. We don't see great clients for these programs tend to be newer companies, companies that are struggling financially, right? Because they can't afford necessarily, don't feel comfortable funding this benefit. They may want to offer it, they may have good reasons to offer it, but it just might not be the right time for them.
Right.
So a lot of times we'll say, like, let's fund it at a time when you're more comfortable, just like you might with an individual that doesn't have the budget right now. It's okay to wait to create a better experience. And we have had people that, want to push that envelope. It's not going to create a good outcome for the client if the carrier doesn't issue the policy either. It's going to be bad for everyone. Your time, the carrier's time, of course, they're investing a lot in this too. But most importantly, the client is going to be really disappointed. Let's just give it a shot. Maybe some people, maybe enough people will do it, like hope. Hope is not a
Yep.
strategy in this business. You will burn more bridges than you will help clients doing that.
100%. And it's okay. And as a matter of fact, I don't think you can afford to not say that. Like Mark said, let's fund this at a time that is better for you to be able to do so. When you're in a better position to do so, that is efficient, right? Because it keeps us from doing more work for an enrollment that may or may not be successful today, so we can spend that time other places. And then when the group is in a good place to be able to fund that benefit, it is efficient and you're working on it at the right time, right? When it works for them to be able to do. Um, Shoehorning with small groups, it just doesn't work. It just does not work. Many of these smaller companies, yeah, we do have to be sensitive, right? Because, um, there are obviously really low overhead, really high profit companies out there, but, most small companies are small for a reason. They are cash flow tight or, are new, just starting out and will grow in the future. But for now, they have to make sure that they can keep the lights on and perform essential business activities, and adding an employer-funded benefit at this point may represent something frivolous, irresponsible, however you want to put it, given the group that you're in front of. And it's okay to feel pain for them too. Wendy, we were on a call with a small group where I had to have this conversation the other day. It was a group of 7, and they wanted to do it all voluntary. And we had to have this exact discussion of, we don't want to look at something that it's probabilistic that we could, reach the minimum on a voluntary basis, but it's also an unknown. And there's, consequences for not hitting it potentially. So if maybe now's not the right time and down the road, it will be a better time. But the last thing I want to do, we're doing this for everybody's own good. The last thing I want to do is be a gatekeeper to a company being able to add an important benefit. But it's also irresponsible to just like kind of go out and do it when it may not be the right time. And I think there can be reservations initially to doing something voluntary, but show them the cost. Sometimes when they see the cost and it comes out cheaper than they thought, actually, I think we might be in a better position than we thought to be able to do something like this. Remember, they're kind of cooking up an idea of the pricing in their head until you actually show it to them, right? So I think things, um, with the group that Wendy and I were talking to the other day, it started as there's no way we can do an employer funded benefit. And we went through the pricing, and the thought all of a sudden became this may be something that we might be able to do now. So let's take a look at it and review it in the new year. I think that's a much better way to handle it than coming up with a bad surprise, right? And having the group feel fried on their experience with you.
Yeah, and you can do just really quick mental math on this. And the nice thing about a 7-person group is if you fund it for everybody, you only have to fund it for 7 people.
Right.
So if the average cost, is $50 a month, which would probably be even on the higher end of what you can get,
It was.
50 times 7, $350 a month. You know, if you get it down to $20, $30 a month, they're really surprised at how low the pricing can be that can lock them in the GI and then give them voluntary buy-ups for those that do want the voluntary, but they have guaranteed that they're going to get that plan once they commit that amount of employer funding. It also is something to be said similar to this, which is just like on the individual side, buy something you can afford to keep, have them fund something they can afford to continue to fund, right? If
Right.
they feel pressure each year, budgetary pressure, that's not a good scenario. They feel like they have to drop the funding. So I tend to err on the side of caution that they're super satisfied with what they're spending because they can do more later. There are the ability to do that later if they choose to do it, but don't push them, and risk them not doing anything at all if they do have the ability to fund a small amount.
Right. And we didn't even have a census in front of us for this conversation, but there was mention made that the group skews sort of young. So what I was able to do is I just pulled out the calculator. We have a default at 45. I said, if it works out that we're kind of like an average age 45 group and we're 7 employees, and what we're looking at for a $10,000 amount, minimum amount is $21 a month. That's our math, give or take some dollars, if that's what our average age comes out to, and we'll get the exact numbers as soon as we get the census to be able to do that, right? So you can have these quick, easy, efficient conversations because you're not having to speculate if this 10,000 person group is average age 45 and, having to do lots of extra mental math there, right?
Yeah. Actually, what I found too is the employer funding turns out to be a relief for them. When they realize the cost is $21 a month, and that takes away the risk of not hitting the minimum participation, they actually have that weight lifted off their shoulders.
Yeah. I feel like
So,
cost could go somewhere in the middle, right? Because some small groups will actually struggle with the cost. Some small groups who are in a good place and are, um, you know, pretty high profit, low overhead may say, no brainer. I can actually look at a higher amount, but that introductory amount seems very cost effective. So cost can be a bit of a fence sitter here.
And Jason, the group that we had, it's a group for nonprofit. So how you handle a profitable company as opposed to a nonprofit where they are very conscious of budget, right? So
Yep.
that's what we dealt with
They
here.
are very conscious of budget, but there are also two different flavors of nonprofits in my mind. So there are nonprofits who are just in the natural way their business works. They are running very close to nonprofit as they are. There are other nonprofits that actually do bring in quite a bit of revenue, and at the end of the year have to go through this practice to get themselves at a state of no profit. So you might actually see nonprofits that are fantastic groups because I have to do something to get to even, right? I have to scramble. I'm looking for things to spend my money on, like that episode of The Office where they have a budget surplus and they argue over what they're going to buy because they need to spend it, or they, you know, the money just kind of goes down a hole, right? So yeah, I think the group that we were talking to represents one that is consistently running at sort of zero profit, but there are some that have to scramble to get there at the end of the year.
Yeah, and they have and she pointed it out too. When you've got the executive director saying this is a great way to attract new staff, and we
Right.
want to build this company, and so this is a great way. And certainly in that age group, they were average age 49 years old. It was just a great way for them. So we'll see.
Yeah, many nonprofits run salaries very low, but that doesn't mean they always run compensation low. Benefits are a great way to kind of make up the difference there.
super common theme to say, hey, we can't increase our salaries, so we're trying to bring on these new benefits. And that's where we get a lot of referrals from like high-end life insurance, disability agents and agencies who almost exclusively work with nonprofits for that reason. Because they're much more
Right.
receptive to benefits. This is a natural add-on for them. And it's like you said, it's a way to compete for talent because that talent can go to other for-profit companies that can offer them higher cash compensation,
Right.
but they're not offering them this rich benefit structure that they value.
100%. There aren't many who look forward to their career. And of course, people have affinity for certain charitable organizations, but I don't think many people are saying when I grow up, I want to work for an organization type classified as non-for-profit, right? Oftentimes there's like a very affinity based reason or a benefits based reason why people go for a non-for-profit versus a for-profit company. So they tend to be very good groups to work with, but not all, nonprofits are created equal and they have to kind of be treated differently in the planning process.
I'm just going to add this one other thing because I know you've got the time frame, but in
Will it help
that,
me fill out my T chart?
yes,
Look,
right. No, I can't. But one of the other things about this group, which is really interesting, of the seven eligible, six of them are women. And so they have all faced a long-term care situation in their past, and some one of them present. So they understand. And to the point of nonprofit or small businesses, boy, those women small businesses, they understand this need. They understand this product. Um, on the individual side, and the group is not that far of a stretch, but when they look at the cost for them, it's a no-brainer for them. So think about that as well.
100%. And I think that goes right in line with the intimacy, right? If we're dealing with a smaller group where everybody's talking to each other, or, we have a light atmosphere whenever we're meeting with the groups, we often hear more stories, actually. People are far more willing to kind of volunteer or, speak about their experience to their colleagues, right? So we do get a lot more of that.
Yeah, one thing I would also add is if you work with going back to like, finding companies that are profitable, oftentimes they are growing. So you might start off with seven employees, but if they're doing really well, they're in a high growth market industry, they might be adding another seven employees in the next 12 months. Sometimes even the carriers have minimum, groups that they look for, but we can make the argument that this is actually a fast growing company, so they're going to meet your minimum, in the future. So I do think it's important also to focus on the right type of client because that's also going to lead you to where the growth opportunities are with that client.
100%. And just to make it a little more clear, I'll put budget on the left-hand side can be part of a drawback. But again, your mileage may vary. Anything else that is kind of, one of the things I really do want to um, put as a positive, I love the platform that we use for smaller groups. If we have a proprietary platform that we use a lot here at Buddy, but we often have scenarios, depending on the carrier, where we have to use other platforms. And I just want to give a shout to the platform we use many times for small groups, Easy Apps Online. If they make Sandy happy, they make me happy, and it's something that you should really think of as a positive. Um, we mentioned this a little bit when we had her as a guest last week, but just makes things so simple. As the broker to be able to take over enroller access, like I was talking about, I was really referring to Easy Apps Online. So a great platform, or even if we are using the proprietary Buddy platform, we just feel like we have a bit more control. And that also kind of goes into access, right? If we're working with a small group and we've got a bunch of apps in process, it is much easier to be able to actually access those employees to say, hey, we have very little time to finish this up. You want to do a one-to-one and we can just get everything finished up for you. And oftentimes, because we're doing employer funding, there's very little to do. If you don't want to buy up, which not everybody's going to want to, if it's not completely census enrolled, we need a few small things like social security number, phone number, and I think one other piece of information, like very, very simple to just get this closed out. Hey, at least, claim what's being purchased for you, right? And even if they don't end up, getting everything in before the deadline, again, that enroller access can allow you to do it on their behalf if you have their consent to do so. So again, I think the numbers and the participation come together much more smoothly.
Jason, one thing I would add, and it can kind of fit in both columns as well, is you generally have fewer group carriers that offer programs for small groups. But the flip side of that is it makes it much easier for the
Yes.
client to make a decision, and they're best of class still. The two that we've talked about on the group side
Yes.
are the Standard, right, formerly Allstate, and Transamerica. Um, but you have even more options than that when you think about maybe you're buying a group plan to get everyone covered, right? The employer's funding it. Maybe you'll supplement that with certain individual products in a much more controllable situation where you've built a relationship and you know who's a good fit for it. Maybe you're able to pre-qualify them, through that group process as you're seeing what the demographics look like in that group. So don't just limit yourself. This kind of opens up the door to even form a comprehensive plan for them. But we really believe in the idea of stacking coverage, right? To have two policies that don't coordinate benefits, that might have indemnity benefits, so you can claim on both policies. That's a really good thing, flexibility wise, to have and diversification wise to have. I myself, I own two policies. I'm sure many of you in this room too have two long-term care insurance policies. Um, Take advantage of that, the fact that you have this access to be able to create that solution. But we almost always start with that group side because A, the value is incredibly good right now, but B, you just don't have any bad experiences, right? Because of the streamlined process and the guaranteed issue. Once
Super
you
good
have
point.
that foundation level built, it's much less risky, any negatives that you run into when you go to the individual market.
Right. So completely agree that it is a fence sitter, right? Less options absolutely means less choices, less eggs in the basket, and less of an ability to pick on an affinity basis. Um, I I think it ends up making the decision-making process very, very easy in a lot of cases. Like, for example, uh, how many employees do you have? Four, three. We are going with the standard. There's no other place we can go with it. It makes that an easy decision. If we have five or more, it is obviously a choice between the two. But we know from just working nationally and, you know, collecting all the data and seeing it from Product Buddy, you'll find yourself in a position where you may be in a state where even if you have these two choices, one is kind of the de facto winner. One of those examples that's come up a lot recently is Michigan. Michigan, uh, the standard doesn't have extension of benefits or restoration of death benefit. So generally, we're going de facto to Transamerica because they have both. Florida, Florida, Transamerica is actually on the opposite side of the coin this time and doesn't have extension or restoration in Florida. So generally, that's a de facto standard case in many cases. And it's very easy to make the explanation, right? I shopped the market. Here's the market.
It's
And
nice that they coordinate so well to have, fill the gap that the other doesn't have.
they play very nice. And yeah, where one doesn't have it, the other seems to in many cases. I'm sure we'll have, one of the, we'll have a North Dakota case come out of the woodwork or something, and we'll learn something new where they complement each other as well, right? But oftentimes it's very easy to prove that you did your homework and give a reason why we're looking at one carrier in this case.
Mhm.
Chop the market is two, and one of them does not have what we consider to be the biggest store of value in these plans as long-term care forward plans. So the one that does is the winner in my book. If we have an extreme reason for not going with the recommendation, of course, door number two is sitting there, but they're very firmly door number two and not door number one, right?
Mhm.
So that decision-making process is very, very easy. We had Brian Gordon on the study group earlier this year, and we had a case study where he had a group that got four proposals back, and we were going through all four of the proposals, and we summarized each of them. And after doing so, we were like, "Geez, you can't really miss. There's something to like about each carrier, and it's." You could largely put it up to preference. We just had access to the four major carriers that we work with. That can make the decision-making process hard, right? Knowing that you can't miss is a nice you know, peace of mind at the end of the day, but you're always going to have in the back of your mind, am I choosing the right one here? So I think lack of options is kind of a weight off the shoulders, more than having, 4 to 6 options at the end of the day.
Yeah, especially for small groups where you want it streamlined, right? It kind of fits well with the overall mentality there.
Yep.
I will add something which I'm really excited about is the standard this year released a term to 100 with long-term care. So now we also have a term product in the small group space, which is very popular, probably the most popular product right now in the large group space. But the fact that we didn't have that and now we do gives you a third product. You might have two carriers, but standard has two products you can use.
Right.
Now, again, to Jason's point, I would tend to lean towards your favorite. I would probably say I'm going to go with term when it's available in that state and just stick with that because, again, I think, you're going to find that the type of client that you work with or you attract, you can present that value proposition. You want to keep that streamlined, that decision. That's what we're doing day in and day out. And we're not hurting the client, right? Like we do quote all the options, but we're making a recommendation based on what we think is the best fit, and usually they're taking that recommendation.
Yep. So a couple more things to just button up before I think we're good here with my little chart. This 3 and 5, this is the number of lives that each carrier will consider. Now that I'm trying to write small and close together, it's just turning into a disaster. 3 lives, 5 lives. But this over here translates to 5 apps. This 3 translates to actually a 6 app minimum. So what we need to do if we do have a group that's 3 or 4 or even 5 if we're choosing to work with the standard, right, is to add a second voluntary benefit line, and that needs to be participated in as well, uh, preferably funded, customarily funded. Oh, that B is ugly. I'm not going to do the eraser. I haven't erased anything yet. We'll have to add a second voluntary benefit. Generally, that tends to be a cheaper accident or critical illness plan. I think where that may be a good thing is if you're working with a small group, you may be working with a new group. You may be working with a group that just, again, doesn't get access to a lot of benefits or is not having a ton of benefit discussions. They may see this as a positive. They may see this as, wow, it's an opportunity to add 2 benefits and get a high value long-term care product, right? Now we can add a product that actually complements the long-term care plan. An accident or a critical illness plan is actually complementary to the long-term care plan. And it's even cheaper than the long-term care plan that we're putting in place. So maybe I only fund this for, say, a couple of people if we're, say, a group of 4 and we need to get to 6, but maybe you end up getting 8 applications out of it, right? If they just fund 4 and 4. So pretty good opportunities there. I don't view this as really a drawback. I view this as another opportunity that oftentimes we find the group being excited about. And even if they're not excited about the actual accident benefit or the actual critical illness benefit, they're like, yeah, just give me whatever's cheaper. I'll throw another benefit on the pile. It's a nice little, piece of compensation, attract, retain sort of tool. Yeah, I generally don't see a lot of resistance if budget's in a good spot.
And when you have two products with a client, you know that relationship is also stickier for you.
Correct. More reasons to reach out.
Yeah. The other piece, just I think you did a really good job of expressing this, and I love the visual, so appreciate the paint. Is it is employees' lives? They're looking for that minimum to be employees.
Yes.
But we're also not talking about the extra opportunity to bring in their spouses, because those are, from our perspective, just as good in terms of clients, additional applications for us, but they do have to hit the employee minimum and anybody
Correct.
extra is just extra cherry on the top for you. In order for the spouse to apply, the employee has to get their coverage too. So always when we have a spouse, we have two apps, right? Because you don't do the spouse without the employee in this market. So again, all of that, again, you can express it as a pro or a con, but I do think those are actually benefits. It just gives you more opportunities and it gives you more rules that, okay, you have to do this to get this plan. And the client's like, okay, that's what I have to do. It doesn't create a decision point for them really, that changes their determination to move forward. That never is something that they object to as a reason not to do this.
Yeah, I think that's actually huge. Because if one spouse is working at a small group that doesn't necessarily get access to very rich benefits, it's not always a guarantee that the other spouse is. So oftentimes there's a lot of excitement to be able to include spouses as well. Or for any reason. It could be a reason that, the spouse can't work, right? Having a small guaranteed issue amount of long-term care that we can get for both uh Transamerica and the Standard in this case, that's a huge help to somebody. So there's a lot of excitement for spouses there. And oftentimes when we're with small groups, we actually find that spouses work at the same employer. Find it with large groups too, more than you might think. But small groups, I'll add it as another positive. Family business. That just adds even more to this level of, um, you know, access and intimacy, right? If this is a family business, guess what? Now the employees are taking this home and discussing it at the dinner table, right? And it's a even bigger part of kind of their lives and communication. Makes it just that much easier. We're moving forward kind of as like a family unit and a couple of people who feel like family, right?
Yeah. Yeah, Gene had mentioned the unisex or gender distinct, gender neutral pricing, I should say. Well, a lot of times when you're including the spouse, right, you don't have to worry. I mean, the fact that they have gender neutral pricing will apply to one or the other oftentimes, right? Male female couples we're talking about. So,
100%.
by the way, before you took that off the screen share, I just wanted to, I was hoping, I was like, this can't be the case, but is Jason gonna make a Christmas tree at the end of this?
All right, I
It's gonna
can.
all come together because I was seeing some branches there.
All
Anyway,
right, I can do it. I'll do my best. As I'm just kind of talking to wrap this up. So in summary, what I wanted to do this presentation for, not only just to give you more of an idea of what we learned for working with small groups, but I also wanted to kind of give you sort of the knowledge, the extreme positives, the things to watch out for. I wanted to give you everything you needed to not fear working with small groups and to be able to make the most of your time with small groups so that they don't take all of your time, but they end up, in fact, being a good use of your time. So, does anybody have any questions as I'm wrapping up my Christmas tree here? I should have used color. But regardless, anybody have any questions about working with small groups? I think they are a fantastic way to add a revenue source to your business and add really, really warm referrals that feel very, very family-like. And I think I like working with people like that, and I think if you do too, this is a really good opportunity for you.
Maybe next year you're gonna have the Peanuts Christmas song on there while you're doing this.
We actually heard that on saxophone this morning at our company holiday party because our lovely CFO is an amazingly talented musician. What did I do? And
So that's Christmas card.
and we got to play Name That Tune. So we actually did get that. But maybe
and
next year
Jason
I'll
and
add some
Jason
audio.
won. His knowledge of Christmas music is second to none.
I come from a family that takes Christmas very, very seriously. So um, I gotta say I'm not surprised, but Wendy is also very good as well. A lot of our team's very good. So that's it. I'm just gonna kind of obsess over my drawing for a second and wait and see if we have any other questions. Or Mark, if you would like to wrap it up with some last thoughts,
The only thing
definitely
I would
feel
mention
free.
is, Gretchen, thanks for putting that link in the chat, which is to our webinar, which will be same time and location as today, but in 2 weeks, I think. that right, Gretchen? 2 weeks or 3 weeks? 3 weeks, sorry. January 8th.
Something like
And
that. Yeah, January 8th.
and if you haven't registered, please feel free to do so. Of course, if you just show up, you can also get in the door just like you do today on today's session. But we will cover more broadly the market review beyond obviously the two small group carriers that we're talking about today, mostly.
Yep.
100%. And you bought me just enough time to finish my tree. So let this also be a lesson to you that presentations don't need to be flashy, that you can get a lot of education out of something very simple. If you get an idea in your mind that you think will help somebody absorb something better, just go and do it. And you could even have a little fun. Shocker, I know. But yeah, that'll do it. Really appreciate you guys being here with us today and all year. This is a great way to close out the study group for the year. Really appreciate you guys. Yeah, I should have done the menorah, but unfortunately, we've run to the top of the hour. I hope you guys have a wonderful holiday. We appreciate all your support. You guys make the study group what it is, and it's a pleasure to show up to it every time. So we're here to support you with anything you need. Come see us in the new year when we talk about the market review. There's lots to be learned there, and hope you have a wonderful time with your families, friends, and those who matter.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.